Welcome back to the Go to Go podcast, man. Episode 97, NBA free agency buzz going on right now. Got some names signed already. Draft happened last week. We're going to dive into some of the free agent moves, some free agents still out there remaining with some big names. Where will they end up for the next NBA season, man? We're going to jump right into it. I think the biggest signing so far of this NBA offseason during the time, PG leaving the Clippers, signing with the Philadelphia 76ers, 4 years, $212 million. Sixers add a veteran wing on the outside to this core of players. How do you like this move so far for the Sixers?
I mean, on paper, I think it's a solid move. It's just kind of, was their long plan this entire time. It's kind of the reason, they had all of this cap space. They made sure, to hold off on signing Maxey just so they could have this money. And it worked out. If you add Paul George, basically just a better Tobias Harris. If you just slot him into that role, I think, the offense, he gives you a little bit of playmaking. Paul George can still have those nights. He can go off, hit some big shots, he can give you 25, 30-point games here and there. But, I think majority of this workload is still going to be on Joel Embiid's shoulders when he's healthy, and Tyrese Maxey, who looked like a all-NBA guard during this season, looked like a, potential all-star guard this season. So, I mean, I think it's a good fit basketball-wise. They also they made a lot of other signings around the edges to add some depth, add some more pieces to this team. But, I mean, if you're Paul George and you go from playing with Kawhi to now Embiid, I think it's just going to be another big question of health. Like, can this team stay healthy? Like, Embiid and Paul George, two players that, repeatedly throughout their career have showed that at times they can't stay healthy on the court. Both of them getting up there in age. Paul George more so. Embiid, I think, reaching his year 30, 31 season. Paul George, I believe, is 34, 35 around there. So that was, one of the reasons the Clippers didn't want to sign him to that extra 4 year. That extra 1 year was kind of the reason Paul George left, where the Clippers were willing to give him the 3-year deal. He wanted 4. So he went out in free agency and found it. So, listen, if you keep everyone healthy, everyone on the court, all the pieces they brought in, I think the Sixers team can make some noise in the East. It's just at this point in their careers, from what these two guys have showed us already, it's kind of hard to imagine a full season of those guys being healthy and being on the court. And, Maxey, he's been pretty healthy so far in his career, but he's going to be, one of those guys that's picking up the load from those two. So the injuries start happening for him as well, to whereas, he has to step up, play a bigger role, a lot more on his plate. Wear and tear could get to him. But, I mean, like I said, on paper, you bring in Jerry McCain, rookie from Duke, add a little, playmaking and shooting off the bench, another young point guard, someone that, this team could definitely use. But, I mean, the East is still – it got a little better during free agency, but in terms of, the top outside of the Celtics, I think it's still open. And if you're feeling like the Sixers, you're feeling like you're competing with the Celtics right now if everyone's healthy. So, I mean, I think it's definitely a better situation than what the Clippers had, just because, there'd be times where Kawhi just didn't play and the pieces around him just weren't as good. Whereas, now Paul George, instead of you being the number one guy or being 1B, he's the number 3 guy on this team, and he'll definitely be able to slot into that role. A lot less pressure on him playing-wise, but in terms of the fan-wise and stuff like that, those Philly fans, there's going to be a lot of pressure there. Just mention Tobias Harris, ask him in Detroit. So, yeah, I like it basketball-wise. I like the fit. It's kind of what they need, some size on the wing, match up with those big Eastern Conference teams, but it's just a matter of health. And can these guys stay healthy? I just find that hard to believe at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. PG obviously dealing with his own injuries this offseason, or this season in general with the Clippers.
Well, he was relatively healthy this season. It was just every year before that or prior to that. I think he played 70.
His career, though,
yeah,
in general.
He played 70 games this past season, which, and had career high numbers. But, prior to that in LA, I don't think he's played more than 60, 65 games. So it's definitely been, a consistency issue with him. And like you mentioned, his entire career had some trouble in OKC. He wasn't really healthy, had that big season. And we all know about the injury he had in the FIBA tournament over there when he was playing with Indiana during the summer. So, yeah, injuries have definitely been a big issue for him.
And, I mean, Embiid, that's the story. I mean, his whole career, too. You look at the Sixers, you nailed it right on point. Maxi's going to have to pick up the load. An athletic guard who, probably more prone to injury with his style of play. He could shoot the rock. He's gotten a lot better facilitating this year, taking into that primary ball handler role. I think it's a nice addition, add the veteran to the squad. You mentioned Tobias Harris. He's finally gone in Detroit. Tobias Harris jokes, I guess, could stop in Philly, but those fans, you mentioned they're ruthless. Compared to Clippers fans, it's a little different. I mean, you got the Lakers in L.A., Clippers fans, not really the big fan base over there. They're not going to go at you. And he finally has to deal with that, I think, honestly, for the first time in his career, because Indiana, 100%. he was the guy in Indiana. OKC, he had a nice little run. Not really the highest expectations with that squad, obviously. They fell short in the playoffs a couple times, but had a solid run over there in OKC's numbers. His production was great. And the Clippers, obviously, little bro to the Lakers. Now you're in Philly, where it's the 76ers when it comes to basketball. It's go home or go hard or go home for the Sixers in Philly sports, just in general. Any Philly team in any league, fan base is sort of the same. So it's definitely going to be different, but I think he could take the step back. You saw Maxey step up in the playoffs last season, really take on that role when Embiid was, banged up, trying to recover from various different injuries during that point in the season. So, Maxey had his shining moments. Consistency now for Maxey going to be coming on to this season for the 76ers, I think, for sure.
And another big question I think is going to be, you talked about, this is going to be the first, real big market team Paul George has played for. You mentioned, the Clippers, they're a secondary team out there in LA. It's all Lakers all the time. And then OKC and Indiana are smaller market teams where, in Philadelphia, playing with the Sixers, looking at the team they have, and, they brought in a couple other guys. You look at, Eric Gordon, Kelly Oubre returns, Andre Drummond, a solid backup center for Embiid. He's been there before. But this Sixers team, Philadelphia, all the buzz around, they're expecting, playoff wins and championship aspirations. Well, you kind of look at the guys on this roster, the 1 and 2, or 1 through 3, Paul George and Embiid, the two biggest names. Not the best resumes in the postseason, man. So it's gonna be interesting to see there. You mentioned Maxey; he definitely stepped up in his first real postseason run with the Sixers last season, but ultimately, once again, those guys fell short. So in terms of success, not much there. So you'd want to see something bigger in terms of, going deep in the playoffs, making the Eastern Conference Finals, making the championship, competing for a ring. But it's just unfortunate because around that time of year, those guys do tend to get injured. They get banged up. We all know Embiid, and, a lot of his faults in the postseason always seem to be because of some kind of injury, not because he's not capable of performing. It's just, when you're that big, you weigh that much, and that, great of an
recklessly.
athlete. Yeah, that great of an athlete, it just takes a toll on your body, so he breaks down. We mentioned Paul George, so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Right now, it seems like the Sixers have, what it takes to compete. You look at the top teams with the Boston, with the Milwaukee, if you still believe in them. A lot of those teams over there in the East, with the Knicks, we'll talk about the Knicks, so I think for the Sixers, it just all comes down to health, and can these guys play their best basketball at the most important times of the season, and can they be healthy? Because outside of that, I mean, you got an MVP candidate. You got, Paul George in his peak. He was, number 3, number 2 in MVP votes out there in OKC with Russ. Maxey, we talked about him, one of the, young ascending players in this league, just signed his 5-year extension. So they got the talent. They got the guys there capable. They added some depth. They got some nice pieces still. So it's just going to come down to health and can they perform on the big stages.
Yeah, even though, PG was the big splash, Maxey, the 5-year extension, I think, me personally, I'm going to go ahead and say it, I think it was the biggest move of this offseason. The Sixers lock up their guard who they got later in the draft. I wouldn't say late, but
think he was in the 20s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So late first round pick. You lock him up. He's shown his promise.
Wait, you think that's the biggest move out of all of free agency or for the Sixers?
I'm gonna say it's definitely the sneakiest.
This sneaky word, bro.
But okay, so
that's what you think. That's what you think. It's just
I think Maxi's that essential for the Sixers, and he is the future.
Yeah.
Even though Embiid is the face, trust the process. The process has gone on for a long time. Really starting to not trust it. So Maxi's kind of that guy that they need to be the face of this franchise in the future. They lock him up for 5 years, which makes me ask, before we even continue, who is your favorite signing so far, either extension-wise or, free agent joining a new team?
So, my favorite signing, signing, or could it be a trade or
sign, trade?
So just a single player, or are we talking about an entire team, what they added, what they did? Or just
single player. Yeah. Because there's been a lot of other teams I think it got better packages this offseason.
Yeah, there has been. This one is kind of. All right. Well, I'm gonna give you two answers here. Right. I think they're both up there. One is Mikal Bridges to the Knicks. And the only reason I say that is just because Mikal's been one of my favorite players ever since I started playing fantasy basketball. He was, that one sleeper guy that I just randomly had late in the draft. And it was the year when he got traded to the Nets, 2 years ago. So, Devin Booker went down, and, Mikal had to step up, and he was going crazy. So, yeah, he helped me win my first year in fantasy basketball.
Also, an avid Chipotle lover.
Yeah. Ever since then, I've been a huge fan of Mikal Bridges, and I just, enjoy his game. And we'll talk about the Knicks and that fit and stuff. But in terms of just pure basketball fit and, low key, I know it sounds weird, and it's not just because of the player to this team. I think it's more because what this player brings to the team. I think it's Chris Paul to the Spurs. I think Chris Paul can legitimately lead the league in assists, playing with Wemby. If I'm Chris Paul, at this point in my career, playing with Wemby, and I don't know if you've seen the clips or whatever, him hooping in the France practices and stuff, getting ready for the Olympics. Yeah, he's in step back threes on Rudy Gobert and catching one-handed put back dunks. He's insane. The ceiling for him is just inconceivable. Well, we're playing with Chris Paul. I think Chris Paul can legit have 20 assists a game. Try to go for the record playing with Wemby in that pick and roll. We all know how good Chris Paul is, how good he's been his entire career. Basically just being a pure point guard, commanding the offense, setting guys up. And when you have somebody like Wemby who can literally just do anything, Chris Paul is gonna make Wemby so much better in the pick and rolls, when to screen, when to roll, how to play make out of it, how to read those angles and cuts. And you can talk about how guys, SGA, even though it was for 1 year, he, still credits Chris Paul for his development and why he was able to become so good. Chris Paul goes over to the Suns. He leaves, after Chris Paul leaves, next thing you know, Devin Booker's a point guard, Kevin Durant's a point guard. All these guys know how to play point guard just because, what Chris Paul brought to that team, how good he was for those guys. So everywhere Chris Paul goes, he brings, an edge and really is one of those locker room guys where he might not be the easiest to get along with or, he's super competitive. He has that edge to him, but he makes guys better, guys that want to learn from him learn. And we know Wemby, you've seen him training with Jamal Crawford. He's saying he just wants to learn as much as he can, him and Rudy. So Wemby is definitely somebody that wants to learn, that wants to get better, wants to reach that potential. And I think Chris Paul, even in his second year, is going to unlock some crazy stuff with Wemby. Going from Jeremy Sohan being your point guard to Chris Paul, who's arguably, one of the greatest pure point guards of all time, Hall of Fame in his knowledge. I just think that Chris Paul Wemby duo is going to be insane. So just in terms of from a basketball standpoint, I think Chris Paul to the Spurs is if I'm Wemby, fam, I'm thinking whatever God I believe in, fam, because that's the perfect matchup.
All right, I like that. Let's keep it in the East. You just spoke on the Knicks and in Bridges. The Knicks this offseason, not only did they add Bridges to this team, they're retaining OG Anunoby, who, thought could possibly walk this offseason especially after that trade. He gets paid. Tibbs gets his guy back, the big wing, lengthy defender that he loves out there. And then you add Bridges, who could do it on both ends of the floor, can score at an elite level, and his defense isn't too bad as well. He's got some length on the perimeter to add to this team. And then you get, the Nova boys out there, the whole joke of the offseason between Bridges. It's a dangerous pickup for the Knicks who, if Brunson's healthy down the line, if OG's healthy down the line, they didn't have Julius Randle all playoffs last year. They got a little squad competing in New York, trying to dethrone, the Eastern Conference teams, especially like the Celtics, defending champs, everything like that. And it seems like the East is getting better besides my Heat so far. And the Knicks, I was like, okay, they get Bridges, cool. But then they re-sign Anunoby, and you're kind of like, all right, now the Knicks are dangerous. Now this team could really compete for a championship easily next season. They stay healthy. I mean, Brunson, what he does in the playoffs, pound for pound, one of the best players in this league, being undersized, just will to score at all three levels. You had Bridges, who you mentioned he could get a spark going, score like crazy if called upon. You get OG, you get Josh Hart, Mr. Do-It-All. I mean, this team's dangerous. I think the only thing stopping them is Tibbs 42 minutes a game, 48 minutes a game in the playoffs. So I think the Knicks probably overall one of the best off seasons thus far in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then, seeing what the Knicks did, seeing, bringing in Mikal Bridges, we can talk about what they gave up. That just kind of seems like that's what the going price is nowadays for, a all-star caliber level player, a player, Mikal hasn't made an all-star game, but a solid, really good role player. We saw Gobert go for a bunch of picks. So, I mean, it's 5 future first. Like, that's just what the going price is. And when you're a team like the Knicks, when you have someone like Jalen Brunson who came over on a very team-friendly deal, looking at it now, a lot of people, mixed feelings about it, to where now it feels like Brunson legitimately played himself into, arguably a top 5 player in this league. And you bring back OG Anunoby. To me, this just shows me, like, the number one thing on the Knicks' radar was we're trying to beat the Celtics. That's what these moves show me. You bring in OG, you bring in Mikal, you already have Josh Hart, DiVincenzo, another solid guy with size. You have all these big perimeter wings now. Randall, you mentioned. You're just trying to match the Celtics with, the Tatums, the Browns, the Derek Whites, the Drew Holidays, and a lot of these big versatile guards. So I think the Knicks are trying to, doing their best to replicate that. And, I mean, on paper, if you just look at the names, some of these names seem, a little bit more elevated version of some of those Boston Celtics players. So the only, concern I have with the Knicks is they lost Hartenstein, and we can talk about OKC and their moves after. He was a really big piece, especially when they were going up some of those bigger guys. When you look at the Embiids and dudes like that, who you got to have size to compete with those guys. Hartenstein, maybe not the best shooter or scorer, but a really solid rebounder, can protect the rim, has a little playmaking to him as well. So I think that's a huge loss, whereas now you just look at Mitchell Robinson and behind him, like, Precious Achiuwa.
I'm pretty sure he's a free agent too.
Yeah,
and I don't think they're going to re-sign him.
Like, you don't have much depth after that. Well, Precious is who they were running out there in the playoffs. But, yeah, you don't have much depth behind Mitchell Robinson, who, a solid big man, a solid role player. But you're going to need more than just that.
Just one.
At the 5 position, yeah, because you're not going to want to play him, another guy who's, has some injuries, missed a lot of last season. You don't want to play him those regular Tibbs minutes. So you want somebody else who Hartenstein, I think, played that role perfectly. Come in, both of those guys when they're on the floor, they're fresh. When you go against some of those bigger matchups, you look at the East. I know your Heat, you don't really think much of them, but you look at a Bam, you look at the Bucks with the Giannis. We just talked about the Sixers and Joel Embiid. Even the Celtics with a Porzingis, you're gonna have the Celtics, although they do have all those wings, Porzingis definitely added the element of size and scoring inside, having a pick and roll. So I think they're going to need to get a little bit bigger on the inside, add some more rebounding, although you do have arguably the best rebounding guard or non-big man in the league, Josh Hart, but you still want some more some more help down low in the paint. So if the Knicks could, maybe I don't know who's left available on the wire, but just pick up, a solid role player, solid swingman at the big to help Robinson, because they're so good. They're so loaded at the guard and wing positions. You just need someone that's serviceable down low to just play some minutes, just, take some fouls away on Embiid, on those, Giannis's, those bigger guys, to just take some of the pressure off of the guards and wings. But, yeah, overall, if I'm a Celtics hater like you and not a big Boston guy, I'm looking at the Knicks as possibly, the number one team in the East right now, the best team coming out.
With it, man.
But, I really like what the Knicks doing. A lot of scoring on the wings. Jalen Brunson, we know what he's capable of. And I think Mikal Bridges kind of got lost in on the Nets over there in Brooklyn, where it was a lot of just Cam Thomas just kind of doing his own thing, and Bridges it's like, okay, I'm just gonna wait it out until I can
Living
get out of
in
here.
Brooklyn, let me just chill.
I'm gonna just wait out until I can get out of here. He got traded in the KD deal. Wasn't his choice to go there or anything. So yeah, not a lot of good things happened for the Nets these past couple years, especially after KD and Kyrie left. So I can understand Bridges not having some of the best seasons there, but you put him in an environment like you mentioned, man. The Nova Knicks, those guys had success in college, won championships together. They have that chemistry. They have that, playing with somebody multiple times, winning with people. You kind of just know where they want to be. You know how they play. That's like a real thing. Chemistry is real. So I think that'll definitely help. It'll be interesting to see where Randall fits and kind of what his take on all of this is. There's been times where, his effort and stuff has been very questionable. So kind of seems like he's getting pushed to the side and all this. But, if he just wants to win, I think he'll fully embrace his role and kind of taking a step back and kind of handing the keys over to Jalen Brunson at this point and being one of the secondary, not a role player, but one of the secondary guys behind Brunson. If he can do that, I think his skill set and what he brings to this team will be, huge. And I think the Knicks can have some real success. But, yeah, Tibbs finally has a lot of players that he can use. He doesn't have to depend on all those guys because of injuries anymore. So hopefully everyone will be healthy and Tibbs can play those guys reasonable amounts of minutes. Because if you think about it, like Josh Hart, DiVincenzo, all these guys are playing like insane minutes. Well, you look at their team now, those guys might be coming off of the bench. Those guys might not be starting. So hopefully they can divvy up the minutes. But it's Tibbs. I'm sure everyone will play just like a bunch of minutes. He'll have like 8 guys on the court playing them all 42 minutes a game. So yeah, I think the Knicks definitely have a chance to compete. If I'm a Knicks fan, this is the most excited I'm feeling like in my life about, like, if I was a Knicks fan, like, this is the best I'm feeling about the Knicks ever in my life. And I think they could legit have a shot to compete for, a ring. But once again, with a lot of these guys, OG, Brunson, smaller guard, Randall, want to see them healthy. But I think these guys can definitely compete and definitely make some noise in the East. And the way this team is built, I think they, similar to the Celtics, we'll talk, some of those teams in the West, I think they could definitely compete with some of those teams in the West as well. So the East will be a lot more competitive this year.
Speaking of the East still, Cavs, they re-sign D. Mitch 3-year deal. Now, good move for the Cavs, heart and soul of that team the past couple seasons while he's been in Cleveland. They retain him. They were close in the playoffs, banged up as well as some of their players. They fell short against these Boston Celtics, but I think the experiment, the D. Mitch, Darius Garland experiment is over. So Garland now probably getting moved via trade this offseason on the Cavs. So that's a name to look out for if your other teams, potential landing spots for him. Wouldn't mind him somehow winding up in Miami, but we'll see. Put him.
What did he need?
Yeah, him, Rozier. You get Jimmy, you get Tyler shipped out of there finally. Let's see if he survives another offseason of allegations and whatnot. But solid pickup by the Cavs. Not too much to talk about. You know what D. Mitch is going to give you. Explosive player, could score. He can really get in a hot streak and go off in a game too, especially in the playoffs. He had this team on his back. It was him and nobody else at one point for the Cavs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really much to say. I think you kind of just said it all. Like, this is just basically them choosing between Mitchell and Garland, unless, they want to do like some kind of weird sign and trade on the extension with Mitchell. But I think at this point, you kind of just ride out Mitchell and then just find a suitor for Darius Garland and kind of, try to get back as much as you can. And if I'm a team, like you mentioned, like the Heat or, maybe even I know the Nuggets, they haven't made any moves, but if I'm a team, maybe even the Pistons, if I'm a team that just needs shooting, that needs a point guard, I will look at Darius Garland. Maybe even if you're a contender, have him come off the bench or whatever. I think Darius Garland's a solid piece. Banged up last year, wasn't didn't really have a strong season, but if you want to buy low and bet on Darius Garland upside, because before that he looked like one of the best young guards in the league. So hey man, if you're one of those teams, maybe the Warriors, they lose Chris Paul, Stephen Curry's getting up there, have kind of Darius Garland play after him, a solid shooter. So it's a lot of moves out there if you're willing to trade for him, kind of a buy low candidate in Darius Garland, like you mentioned. But yeah, I mean the Cavs they don't get much better, much worse. Just paying their all-star player, so not really much there.
Move it to the West side. We just touched on Hartenstein. He goes to the OKC Thunder, and they, had a pretty busy offseason. They deal Giddey in a trade to the Chicago Bulls, and they get Alex Caruso, high energy level player, can really fly high. He can do a lot of things. He was a key player in that Lakers run, and it's sort of, time in Chicago, not really much going on for the Bulls wise, especially with, DeRozan injured, Levine injured. Wasn't really playing for much, but he can contribute, especially I think with the Thunder, because his role is not going to be, to be a number one scorer. It's going to go out there, be the chippy player he is, dive, get the loose balls, hustle plays. I think he's going to fit right in with this team. And I mean, they get Caruso, Hartenstein, they get the big man who, all they had was Chet, and it was like, Chet is 7 feet, but he really doesn't add any, physical size in terms of weight. So they get Hartenstein. Now you run Hartenstein and Chet, who could spread the floor, and now you got two true 7-footers on your team, probably in the starting lineup for the Thunder. You throw Caruso in there, in the rotation, SGA, J-Dub, other Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on. It goes on and on for the Thunder. You got a lot of guys now, got the size, as I mentioned previously. I like their offseason moves in the West, trying to be contenders, young core of players, and they only add to it this offseason. What's your take on it?
The best team in the West just got better. I know they didn't go to the finals, and the Mavericks ended up beating them, but in terms of being a number one overall seed, having the best record in the West, this team just got better in all the places they needed to get better at. I think Hartenstein, he's the big key piece here. You mentioned adding some size, adding some rebounding. Thunder got absolutely killed on the boards, especially going against those two bigger guys in Lively and Gafford against the Mavs. So adding Hartenstein, you mentioned earlier, with the Knicks losing him, add some playmaking at 5, great at rebounding, protecting the rim. A guy that can kind of do it all as a big man. Definitely unlock some things for Chet. Like you mentioned, he can kind of roam around, play a little more freely, hang around that, 3-point line a little more, a big who can really stretch the ball. So I think that'll make his game better. And then Alex Caruso, like you mentioned, he's never going to be, a number one option, never going to be a number one scorer, but a guy that can hit open threes, hit open shots, kind of create his own. But, just do all the dirty work, do all the, little things that have to get done to win championships. He's going to rebound. He's going to hustle for loose balls. He's going to be that glue guy for this team, which I kind of think they were really missing. They have a lot of good defenders on the perimeter. You look at Case and Wallace. You look at Lou Dort. Now you add in Caruso, another guy that can just pretty much guard 1 through 3. That'll definitely help. And then Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, bringing those guys back. Key depth pieces for this team. Isaiah Joe, it was at times where it seemed like he was the only one that can bring in some offense for that team. Shoots the 3-ball really well. So, yeah, it's hard to see a world where the Thunder aren't the, favorites coming out of the West. I definitely think they are right now. I mean, I'm sure you agree. But, yeah, this OKC team, they're gonna be a force to reckon with next season. Especially we talked about that playoff experience. We kind of saw SGA on the big stage. He definitely stepped up. He was ready for the moment. Some of those other guys didn't play as good. You mentioned the Giddey, who they traded away. J-Dub has some shaky games, so those guys learned from it. And we saw SGA looked like he can be a number one option on a championship team. Add in the new pieces. Add in, Caruso has some experience. Won that ring, like you mentioned, has championship experience. Hartenstein played some good series for the Knicks. He's bounced around a little bit. He has some playoff experience. So, yeah, it's going to be this OKC team, bro. They're definitely set up to make some noise, man.
Yeah, speaking of the team that came out of the West, I mean, the Mavericks, they go ahead, they get Klay Thompson in a sign and trade. Klay felt like the Warriors kind of disrespected him with his contract, told Curry not to use, any of his influence to keep him in Golden State. So the end of an era with Klay Thompson, with the Warriors, the Splash Bros backcourt. We're talking about Luka and Kyrie, best backcourt of all time. But this backcourt, changed modern basketball how we know it today. Curry, obviously, with his three-point shooting, his range, and Klay Thompson being one of the best, just pure shooters in his own respect, never needing a dribble. I mean, it was that one time I think he put up
60 points on 11 dribbles.
On 11 dribbles, yeah, exactly. So one of the pure off-ball players, and with two ball-dominant guards in Luka and Kyrie, you had a veteran guy like Klay Thompson. Maybe he still has something left in the tank. It wasn't really the right fit last season with the Warriors. They changed their game. It changed the way they play. Obviously, played horrible in that elimination game. Everyone still jokes about to this day the way Klay played, but I think it's a solid pickup for the Mavs. They get, a former – he's obviously lost a step, especially with his defensive abilities and his lateral movement and his athleticism. But this was a two-way 3-and-D guard who could really lock up the perimeter and guard the other team's best. So they add a nice little piece. They get Quentin Grimes in a trade as well, adding some pieces. But this is a team that just made the finals. They ran out of gas. Luka bandaged up every game. Obviously, best ability is availability, but, at some point you got to be better than just available. You need to be a little bit healthier. Maybe the series is different for the Mavs. They had Klay. I think it's a solid pickup, veteran piece to a contender in the Mavericks.
Yeah, if you're Klay Thompson, he reports saying he just wanted to win, and obviously the money aspect too, no state tax in Dallas. But in terms of wanting to win a ring and just basketball fits, I think this is like an amazing fit for Klay Thompson and who he is now at this point in his career. Like you mentioned last season with the Warriors, I mean, they were just asking so much of Klay Thompson. He just kind of isn't that player anymore. Like with the Warriors, it was, all right, Steph Curry, you can get us 30 points. Who else is going to score over 15? Who else is going to give us 20? Like, it was a question mark literally every single game. And at times they were looking for Klay Thompson to kind of be that old Klay Thompson, whereas, after the injuries, after all that, he just isn't that anymore. But what he's going to be able to be playing with the Mavericks, playing off of Luka, who, I mean, we saw all playoffs, this end of the last season. He just creates shots for players, playing off of Kyrie, another elite playmaker, can get guys open, can create his own shot and create shots off of his, ability to ball handle and stuff like that. Like, Klay Thompson he's just going to have so many open shots, to whereas now he just has to, get to his spots and hit open shots. Whereas before, the Warriors were relying on him to be our true number two, be our second leading scorer. To where now, I mean, there's going to be times where he's, the fourth or fifth option, where you look at the two bigs the Mavericks have. Both of those guys can go off in the game and create some trouble inside. And then on the perimeter, Luka and Kyrie, I mean, you just let them do all the work. Klay Thompson just gets to hang around the perimeter and shoot threes. And, I mean, he had a down season, compared to what Klay Thompson is, but still shot around, 40% from three, still can be an elite shooter, and just won't have the volume and won't have all the weight on his shoulders like he had to be in Golden State. So I think basketball fit, this is going to be a great fit for Klay Thompson. We saw in the finals down the stretch, guys like Derrick Jones Jr., guys like, Josh Green, PJ Washington. I mean, Celtics weren't even contesting them. Like
they were catch and shoot three.
The Celtics were just letting them shoot. You put Klay Thompson in that position. I like him to hit a lot more than what some of the other role players did.
I agree. I'm right with you.
Even though, like he had the 0 for 10 in the elimination game, like you said, a lot of jokes. But, I mean, that's a completely different role. Like, we're not expecting Klay Thompson to be, prime Warrior Dynasty's Klay Thompson where he's locking guys up on the, defensive end and shooting 45% from three. That's just not who he is. So, if he's, shooting a couple threes a game, running little motion screens for him, get him his, his 1 or 2 mid-ranges a game, I think that's going to be the perfect opportunity for Klay Thompson. Only question with the Dallas Mavericks is they lost Jones Jr. Where's the defense going to come from? Like, we saw Luka just getting hunted game after game in the finals, kind of, scratching your head and wondering why a lot of other teams didn't do that in the playoffs. But Boston definitely unlocked that. Kyrie, another undersized guard, although, he definitely gave some effort defensively on the defensive end. This playoff run just limited. Klay Thompson, definitely not who he used to be. But you look at Quentin Grimes, a younger guard, has some athleticism, has some juice on the perimeter. And Najee Marshall, he had a, using your term, sneaky good playoff, performance against OKC with the Pelicans in that first round. He made some big shots. He was able to go out and run. I think they're going to definitely rely on him to step up and play some solid defense on the perimeter because the paint is good. They got the 2 big men, but it's going to be tough trying to guard those guards, trying to guard perimeter and not get blown by. So I think they're going to expect a lot from Najee Marshall. But, yeah, I don't know what the Mavericks are going to do defensively. I mean, at this point, they're probably just going to try to outscore everyone, just score like 125, 130 a game and hope for the best and just say your team can't score as much as us because at that point, that's looking like their best option for defense right now.
Yeah, I think Luka was at a smaller dose, was getting hunted in the West playoffs, but his defense was far better. You could tell in the finals he lost a step, lost energy. Obviously, still not the greatest defensive player, and the Celtics picked him apart.
I just think a lot of the matchups, they were able to just stick Luka on somebody and kind of hide him. They weren't exposing him. You could hide him. When you look at, against the Timberwolves, just stick him on Rudy Gobert. Like, unless he's down low in the paint, he's not doing anything. Just guard whoever is sitting in the corner. Like, against OKC, stick him on Giddey or Jalen Williams, the backup Jalen Williams, like whoever's on the court there, like, or Lou Dort. He's as good as he is defensively, like offensively, you're not really worried about him. Whereas the Celtics, like when they had their like death lineup on the court, there was really nowhere for Luka to hide. He couldn't really switch on anybody. So I think it was more of teams not being able to have the personnel and not have the schemes or whatever to get Luka playing defense. The Mavericks were able to, kind of just hide Luka and rely on those 2 rim protectors to just deter everyone from the paint. And Luka can just, that's why he led the playoffs in steals. He was able to sag off, play those passing lanes because he knew he had help in the paint. So, yeah, I don't know what they're going to do defensively.
Keeping it in the West, man. LA, let's start with little bro Clippers we spoke about earlier. They get James Harden back, 2-year deal. Derrick Jones Jr., who left the Mavericks, he goes to the Clippers. Batum, fourth quarter, yelling why Batum in. 2-year deal, he returns. They get Mo Bamba on a 1-year deal. And then Kevin Porter Jr. makes the return to the NBA on a 2-year deal. A young player who showed some, bright spots in his terms of basketball play.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
I had to make sure I worded that one correctly. But you get Harden back. Kawhi, obviously, I mean, with the Clippers, they're obviously trying to win now mode. And they're really a ticking time bomb at this point if they can't get a healthy season out of their superstar and former NBA champion in Kawhi Leonard, and they're leaning on a aging Harden who's probably going to start regressing soon. I mean, obviously, he's not the same James Harden as he already once was, but like the pickup of Derrick Jones Jr., you had that perimeter defense and add a guy who can guard the best player on the other team. And And then you also get some size with Mo Bamba. We haven't really seen too much from him. Add some depth to that big man position. You have Zubac. So it's going to be interesting for the Clippers this season trying to compete. Is that new stadium? I think it's next year, right? Or not this? Not
Yeah,
this,
it's this upcoming season.
It's this year. New stadium unveiling. They got to have superstars playing. They get Harden. Let's see. Kawhi was out there in Puerto Rico, or was it the DR?
I think so. Yeah,
Celebrating his 33rd birthday. He kind of looked like Kendrick Lamar when he was homeless in that one Power episode. But
whoa, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm just saying, bro. Like he looked tired, gassed, hair not done, just classic Kawhi.
Interesting comparison. But
you told me you didn't like.
No, you got it, bro.
I'm gonna find a pic, bro.
But I've seen the picture.
I know, bro.
The Clippers, you know, a lot of these players they signed and re-signed. Kawhi on the 3-year deal, bring in Harden on the 2-year deal, sign him back. A lot of the other guys on 2-year deals, 1-year deals. Like, this is clearly like a win now mode, but in reality, you're relying on Kawhi Leonard and the aging James Harden, like you mentioned, to be your focal points at this point in their career. I just think it's not going to happen. So on paper, like you mentioned, open up this new stadium and, you know, the way you're delegating this money and, you know, not signing Paul George to the 4-year contract, wanting to keep it 3 years, wanting to keep Kawhi your highest paid player. Like, you can say this is a win now window, but in reality, I think these are just all ways to kind of get out of these contracts a year or two down the road, where I just don't see any way this Clippers team is going to be a real competitor in the West. Like, even if you do get a miraculous 2019 healthy Kawhi run, and even if James Harden can return back to Philly James Harden when he was happy playing with Embiid and Maxey pre-playoffs, like, I mean, it's going to take James Harden going back to his MVP self and Kawhi going back to, you know, his finals MVP self for this Clippers team to make noise. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't really see anywhere this Clippers team can go in the near future. So I just think they ride out these 2-year, 3-year deals and kind of just prepare for the future and life after Kawhi and Harden, because like I mentioned, the way these contracts are looking, the extensions and the timeline on these contracts, 2-3 year deals, like it's going to be sooner rather than later, I think, before the Clippers kind of go into another direction and maybe trade some of these guys or let some of these guys go, or just play them until the end of the contract and they move on. So, yeah, win now for the Clippers, but they're not going to be winning much.
Another rebuild foreshadow coming soon for the Clippers.
I mean, the way the West is looking and how these teams, like we mentioned, you know, the Mavericks got better. They're going to be scoring a bunch. OKC, Denver, I mean, we can talk about them.
Still got like Minnesota and Ant.
Minnesota, yeah. These teams in the West, they're not going anywhere.
Speaking of which, the Lakers, who do still play at the Staples Center, obviously, elephant in the room, dad-son duo, first time in the NBA, Bron and Bronny, whatever. The Rich Paul told teams if they draft Bronny, he's going to be playing overseas for the Shanghai Sharks or whatnot. But, I mean, cool deal. You get, you know, father-son duo for the first time in the NBA. Jokes about, you know, Jordan couldn't get his son into the league, but Bron could, who's really the GOAT. Obviously, just jokes on end, but the Lakers, LeBron, is he even going to, you know, stay? He opted out of that contract, his current contract, to take a pay cut for a big splash in free agency if they got, you know, a veteran presence ready to win now. Some of the guys that he wanted included, you know, Jonas Valanciunas, who signed, Paul George. He was part of the.
Shout out Jonas Valanciunas, man.
Paul George,
he
a
made
solid
the cut.
big man. I don't know how though, bro. Because it's like what, PG, Valanciunas, and it was someone. Klay Thompson, yeah. And Jonas Valanciunas gets thrown in there. Obviously, you still got DeRozan, who home is LA, so he'd be having a homecoming, returning back to his birthplace in Los Angeles. But So Braun said he was willing to take a pay cut. We'll see what goes on with those contracts. I think he does stay. Bronny's in LA. His home's in LA now. He's going to stay with the Lakers, I personally believe.
Yeah, he just, made them draft his son and then sign one of his good friends and podcast co-host as a head coach. And just maybe LeBron's just secretly a horrible person and just leaves the Lakers after forcing them to do all that.
They said LeBron could do the funniest thing in NBA history. Like, Cleveland, I'm coming home.
Back to Miami.
He always got home in 305, Brian. I'll tell you what.
Fit on the Celtics. They just handing out money.
All right, yeah, they are throwing out some crazy, unlimited money in Boston. Whatever's going on has got to be some type of fraud. How they're able to get away with this, but the Lakers, they want to win now. AD, LeBron, both up there in age, injuries. Bron, past couple of years finally dealing with like real injuries that had him out for parts of seasons. AD, obviously injury-prone player. They draft Dalton Knecht in the first round. That was their other draft pick who could more than likely make a more play-now player than obviously Bronny, who's more of a raw prospect. But if the Lakers do want to compete in this deep West like we talked about, kind of like the Clippers, they're going to need to add something if they truly want to at least compete in the playoffs. It's going to be a tough road. You can't really rely on triple-double, Bron turning back the clock, 3-1 Cavs. So it's going to rely on health and maybe add another piece like the DeRozan, maybe like a Zach LaVine, because the Bulls are trying to move off. I saw not only LaVine but Lonzo Ball as well. Maybe Lonzo Ball turns back home to the Lake Show. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Lakers?
So 2 years ago, the Lakers, lost to the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals. Mm-hmm. And after that game, if I were to tell you, you get a healthy LeBron all season, a healthy AD, D'Angelo Russell after, his horrendous playoff performances into the season, you get a solid D'Lo season. He becomes hot from three.
I think it was one of his best seasons.
Gets hot from three, has some shaky games in the playoff, but definitely steps up and is a lot better than he was last year in the playoffs. And Austin Reeves continues to get better, and you have a solid Austin Reeves season. I'm telling you, yeah.
Contenders.
They're back in the Western Conference Finals, bro. What are you saying? Where in reality, all of that happened, and they didn't make it out the first round. So, I just don't see a route or where the Lakers can get better, where they literally had a perfect season in terms of LeBron and AD health and things around them. In that sense, they bring back Max Christie on a 4-year deal. That's cool and all. He just hasn't really contributed at all to the Lakers on this roster ever since they drafted him. So, Knecht, I think he'll be kind of, for the Lakers, he's the biggest piece. I think he'll definitely play now. Somebody that can come in and has a little size, an older rookie. He'll definitely, I think he's 24, 23, turning 24 or already 24. He'll definitely come in, be able to play now, have that confidence, could really score the ball in college. So I think his shooting will definitely help. But yeah, I think the Lakers are kind of similar to the Clippers, just stuck in, mediocrity right now.
23 Knecht.
Yeah, so, definitely an older rookie for the NBA, has some of that experience. He's played a lot of basketball. So I think he's definitely be more of a play now, more of a ready rookie to contribute, like you mentioned. But the Lakers are kind of just stuck in the middle, bro. They're kind of like the
Limbo.
Clippers. Yeah, I can see a couple teams that were below them last year jumping them. Maybe they can jump a couple teams, but they're not cracking the top 4, top 5 teams in the West right now. I just don't see how, and I'm sure you don't get another completely healthy season from AD or even LeBron at this point. D'Lo opts back in after saying he wanted to leave, after everything that happened again in the playoffs. Are you going to get another D'Lo season like that again? Maybe there's a move or something to make at the deadline. Someone becomes unhappy. There's a big star that they can go get. But right now, I think the Lakers are kind of just mediocre.
I don't know how this totally. BI obviously wanting. The Pelicans want nothing to do with BI at this point. Does he make a return back to the Lake Show, the original team that drafted him, or even possibly DG Darius Garland to the Lakers and get a true point guard and maybe move off of D'Lo this season as well.
I mean, maybe that'll make them better, but when you have LeBron, you want to compete for championships, and I don't really see a move out there now or someone that's available that can kind of make them a championship contender at this point. Like, if you bring in BI, like, that's cool, but what does he really do for you, bro? Like, I mean, there's a reason the Pelicans didn't want him. Like,
they just didn't want his contract.
Exactly. Like, and
he was unhealthy towards the end of the season, I will say.
Yeah. In the biggest moment of the season, got put in that torture chamber.
Yeah.
Like, didn't step up, couldn't hit shots.
Yeah,
like
he was playing hurt, but I agree with you.
Maybe playing off of LeBron and AD get some more space, but I don't know, bro. I just think the Lakers, where it seems like everyone in the league is getting younger, more athletic, kind of adding a lot of the moves. It just seems like the Lakers are moving in the wrong direction, kind of like the Warriors and Clippers at this point in the West. Even the Suns, like.
Yeah, the Suns didn't even want to. They made some. We don't even need to talk about the Suns. Any other teams you want to touch on during this offseason? Things you liked, anything like that?
I mean, we could touch on some of the other bigger contracts. Like before, we were talking about KCP to the Mavs.
Yeah.
I think he fits that team perfectly.
To the Magic.
Or the Magic, yeah. Excuse me.
Veteran presence.
To a young
squad.
To a young squad that, kind of needed a little more scoring down the stretch in the playoffs. Someone that can, has experience playing off of a number one, where you look at, Paolo and maybe him helping his playmaking a bit. But I think he also fits nicely into that, defensive, tough-nosed mentality that the Magic have. KCP, a solid perimeter defender, can not be the best matchup at times. Like we kind of saw Ant Edwards just destroy him in the playoffs. But I think he's a solid perimeter defender. He'll definitely step in. Now he's playing along Jalen Suggs. Those guys will have some solid defense there. I think that's a good fit. And the Nuggets kind of just not too sure what they're doing, man. That's, back-to-back seasons where they lose key pieces of their team, and the GM coming out saying, we're relying on these young guys. Well, yeah, Christian Brown steps up. Peyton Watson, these guys step up, but like who's after them? Like who's the depth? So I mean, the Nuggets, I think, are, they have Nikola Jokic, arguably the best player in the world, top 2, 3, whatever you want to say. But, I mean, they bring back Jamal Murray. He got a contract extension. But outside of that, it's like, or Murray has a contract extension coming up soon, maybe. But outside of, Jokic and Murray, like you have KCP, or not KCP, you have MPJ, solid, okay defender, can shoot the ball, rebound. Aaron Gordon, more of an interior player, playing off of the cuts of Jokic. Like, outside of that, it can look a little shaky for Denver. So, I mean, I don't want to discredit them just yet, just because they have Jokic, and we see what Murray is able to do in the playoffs. He kind of elevates his game. He steps up, but I think there's definitely some moves still to be made for Denver if they want to get back to that championship competing level. Because, I mean, especially after you win that first one, like you have Jokic, best player in the world, 3-time MVP. Like he's at his peak right now. You should be adding players, not taking away key pieces. So Nuggets moving in an odd direction for me, but I'm still not gonna bet against Murray and Jokic until it happens. So I think they'll be okay for the time being. I think they're still one of the top contenders.
I'm right with you. It is a bit puzzling. Can't count them out just yet, but if you're a Nuggets fan, you want to make some moves. Obviously, last season falling short in the playoffs and sort of not meeting expectations as going for that back-to-back. So many teams have targets on your back, and now being another year removed, Jokic and Murray, everyone hears about how good that team is. They still have a target on their back because people are going to talk about him when they talk about the West. Jokic, the best, most gifted big man we've probably ever seen play the game of basketball at this point. So it's always going to be, can the Nuggets get better at this point, because they're losing a lot of pieces and a lot of key pieces from that championship run that really elevated them and made them, help contribute to a championship. So let's see if they got something left in the tank off season. Just getting started, some names out there, some pieces.
Yeah,
that they could plug.
I think it was reported that they offered, a package of Michael Porter Jr., something like that, around, a Paul George trade, before George signed to the Sixers, when the Clippers were kind of seeing if he was, or teams were seeing if Paul George was available. Clippers obviously turned that down and all the other deals as well. So maybe, that Porter Jr. contract, that's a big number. Maybe that's something they can kind of move off of, trying to trade, add a couple more pieces. But, I mean, I don't know at this point. Maybe that's something to keep an eye on, but it's just I'm with you. Kind of like you should be looking to add guys, not take people away.
Mm-hmm. Any other acquisitions you like?
No, that's pretty much it. We covered all the big ones. I mean, the Raptors and other teams
Scotty got an extension.
handing out money. Him and Emmanuel quickly got paid.
Scotty 561.
Scotty Barnes, yeah.
The Kings did re-sign
Malik Monk,
who probably would have won six-man if he didn't go down for that injury.
Shout out Naz Reid, man.
Naz Reid solid, but come
Big
on,
jelly.
Monk was having a season before that, and I mean even the Kings who were competing.
Talk about Murray, DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans. They made that trade.
Oh yeah,
but we kind of touched on the Pelicans already.
Trey moving on.
Brandon Ingram getting moved out. Trae Young, yeah. Now he gets to not have to share the ball with anyone else. I'm sure he'll enjoy that. Not too sure how anyone else on the team will enjoy it, but he will.
Two PG experiments over in Atlanta.
Yeah, and they say Trae Young's not the best teammate or best person to play with, so I can understand that.
Well, I mean, he led that. That's I don't want to say sorry Hawks team, but he was out there competing in the Eastern Conference and.
Well, yeah, but it's just gonna be,
it's gonna
Trae
be
Young centric. Like it's gonna be all Trae Young. Like you live or die by Trae Young, and I mean, I'm sure he's cool with that. But if I'm his teammate, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But hey, man, Hawks chose their guy. Can't blame them.
Any other?
Nah, I mean, we touched on the Celtics handing out all that money. Jason Tatum resigned his biggest contract.
I know you. Go ahead.
I mean, it's not much to say. I mean, the only thing
they're retaining their team, their core players.
I think I saw something like their payroll is like $900 million or something ridiculous like that. I don't know. They got a bunch of money there. They're just handing bread out.
Hand me a couple bucks.
And then apparently their owner is making their team available to buy now. So
yeah, I did see that.
If you got $1 billion and want to invest in the Celtics, go ahead.
I think you'll need more than that at this point, but.
Oh yeah, because it'll be down the road, so you got a couple bill.
Maybe you trying to go half or what? On the Celtics?
No. I'm cool off the Celtics, bro. I'll wait for the next opportunity to come by.
Yeah, for sure. That's gonna conclude Go episode 97, man. NBA free agency frenzy, I guess, just getting started, rolling off. This offseason, dog days, summer, as you would say. What we got? We got World Cup coming up, right? Olympics, or is it?
Olympics, yeah.
Yeah, Olympics coming up.
See if anything's happened since we started. Kyle Anderson to the Warriors. There's
slow-mo.
A trade.
To the Warriors?
Second round pick swapping some cash for Kyle Anderson. Yeah, that's the league-altering move right there.
Is that your words or your sarcastic word? Okay, good.
No, that's my real words, bro. Like, they're contenders now, 100%.
That's where we're gonna end it. Go pod on TikTok, go YouTube, wherever you stream, everything like that. And until next time, man, we'll be back with another episode. Peace.